397. That's how many confirmed kills Rachel Carter had as a Green Beret sniper before she traded her rifle for a tractor. She returned to her family's farm in Pine Valley, Wyoming after her husband's passing, determined to raise her 2 children alone. 50 years old, hardened by years of service, but softened by her love for the land, she thought she'd left the battlefield behind for good. The quiet life didn't last. The summer days were filled with early mornings and long hours, but Rachel found solace in the rhythm of farm life. One bright morning, as she repaired a section of fencing along the western boundary of her property, her movements were precise, a habit carried over from her years as a sniper. She didn't immediately register the distant hum of a motorcycle until it grew louder, stopping abruptly at the edge of her field. Rachel looked up, squinting in the sunlight, to see a man with a scruffy beard and sharp eyes. His leather vest bore a patch reading, "Iron Wolves." The man gave her a long, appraising look, the weight of his gaze setting her on edge, before revving his engine and riding off in a cloud of dust. Rachel lingered for a moment, her hands gripping the fence post tightly. Something about the encounter felt wrong, a silent warning in her gut that wouldn't ease. She straightened her back and glanced at the distant hills, scanning the horizon before resuming her work, her mind already turning over the possibilities. Later that day, her 16-year-old daughter, Emma, ran into the barn, her voice urgent. "Mom, Mrs. Bradley called. She said some bikers were asking about us at the gas station. They wanted to know if we own this place." Rachel's stomach tightened. "Did they say why?" Emma shook her head. "She said they looked serious, organized." "Where's Ethan?" Rachel asked, referring to her 11-year-old son. "Out back with Max." Rachel stepped outside, her eyes sweeping the horizon. Her Australian Shepherd Max barked sharply from near the chicken coop. Rachel's hand instinctively rested on her hip, though the sidearm she used to carry was long gone. She spotted Ethan crouched by the coop, his face pale. "Mom," he said, pointing toward the road. "I saw 3 bikes earlier. They stopped and stared at the house. Max has been acting weird all morning, like when that mountain lion came down last year." Rachel nodded. "You and Emma stick close to the house. I'm going into town." The Pine Valley feed store was bustling as usual, but the tension in the air was palpable. When Rachel entered, heads turned. Sam, the store owner, greeted her with a grim nod. "Rachel," he said quietly, leaning over the counter, "I heard about the Iron Wolves sniffing around your place. They've been making their way through the valley. Farms, businesses. Anyone who can't pay their fees ends up with a burned barn or worse." Rachel's jaw tightened. "How many?" "A dozen or so, but they're well armed. Not your average gang. These guys have ex-military among them." The bell above the door jingled, and in walked her neighbor, Martha, a widow in her 70s who'd lived in Pine Valley all her life. She hurried over, clutching a folded newspaper. "Rachel, you need to see this," Martha said, opening the paper to a grainy photograph of the Iron Wolves' leader. A man called Viper. His face was weathered, his expression cold. "They've already taken over 3 towns north of here, burned the Thompson farm last week when they refused to pay." Rachel's mind worked quickly, calculating angles, planning contingencies. "Thanks for the heads up. Let me know if you see or hear anything else." Back at the farm, Rachel found Emma and Ethan finishing their chores. Emma's eyes were sharp, her instincts as quick as her mother's. "Mom, I saw a black motorcycle go past twice while you were gone. They're watching us, aren't they?" Rachel nodded. "We're not panicking, but we're not ignoring it either. Stick to the routines we talked about. Stay close to the house. Keep Max nearby." That night, Rachel sat on the porch cleaning her old shotgun. She'd purchased it for coyotes, but tonight it served as a reminder that the farm was not an easy target. Her hands moved methodically, a comforting rhythm she'd used countless times in the field. The quiet chirping of crickets mixed with the distant rustle of leaves, but Rachel's thoughts were elsewhere. Her eyes drifted toward the barn, to the false wall hidden behind stacks of hay bales. Behind it lay her old sniper rifle and tactical gear, tools she'd prayed she would never need again. Yet, as she thought about the bikers and the threats they carried, she knew the time to unlock that cache was drawing closer. She'd prepared for this moment long ago, back when she first bought the farm, trusting her instincts to shield her family from dangers unseen. 2 days later, the first real confrontation came. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the field when 4 bikers rolled up to the farm's gate. Dust trailed behind their machines as they came to a stop, their engines rumbling like a distant storm. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, dismounted with deliberate confidence. His patch read, "Viper," and his leather vest was covered in insignias that spoke of rank and violence. Rachel emerged from the house, her posture calm but her every movement deliberate, her years of training evident even in how she approached. "Nice place you got here," Viper said, his voice a gravelly drawl that carried both amusement and menace. "Shame if something happened to it." "Private property," Rachel replied calmly. "Keep moving." Viper chuckled. "Oh, I think you misunderstand. We're offering protection, reasonable fee. Say $5,000 a month." "Not interested." His smile faded. "Everyone's interested eventually. Just ask the Thompsons." Rachel didn't flinch. "You've said your piece. Now get off my land." Viper's eyes narrowed. "You've got till the end of the week. After that, things might get unpredictable." As the bikers roared away, Rachel's mind was already racing. She walked the perimeter of her property, noting boot prints in the dirt and tire tracks in the gravel. These men weren't just bullies, they were trained. That night, Rachel called Martha, Tom from the feed store, and a handful of other trusted locals. They met in the barn, discussing what to do. "The sheriff's useless," Tom said. "They've got him in their pocket." Martha nodded. "Then it's up to us." Rachel unveiled her sniper rifle and tactical maps. "If they're coming for us, we're not going to make it easy." Over the next 3 days, they transformed Pine Valley into a fortress. Fences were reinforced, vantage points established, and escape routes mapped out. Emma and Ethan learned basic tactical maneuvers, their youthful determination bolstered by their mother's unyielding resolve. When the Iron Wolves returned, it was just before dawn. 20 bikes rode down the main road, their riders splitting into tactical flanking positions. Rachel spotted them from her perch in the hayloft, her rifle steady as she whispered into the radio, "Positions. Stay low." Viper's voice rang out over the din. "Last chance. Give us the farm and we'll let you walk away." Rachel's response was a single shot that took out the engine of his lead bike. The explosion of smoke and sparks sent the bikers scrambling for cover. "Game on," Rachel muttered. The next hour was a whirlwind of chaos and precision. Rachel's rifle barked in controlled bursts, disabling vehicles and scattering the attackers. Her allies held their positions, using the terrain to their advantage. Even Emma got in on the action, her softball bat connecting with the arm of a biker who tried to breach the barn. By sunrise, the Iron Wolves were retreating, leaving behind half their bikes and a handful of injured men. Viper glared at Rachel from the back of a pickup truck as it sped away, his parting words carried on the wind. "This isn't over." Rachel knew he was right. The wolves would regroup, likely bringing reinforcements. But she also knew they'd underestimated Pine Valley. They weren't just fighting a single mother and her neighbors. They were fighting a community that refused to back down. As Rachel stood in the aftermath, surveying the damage and rallying her people, she felt a deep sense of purpose. This was more than a fight for her farm. It was a fight for everything her parents had built, everything she wanted her children to inherit. And she wasn't about to lose. The next night, the wolves returned, this time with 30 riders and heavier weapons. The air in Pine Valley was thick with anticipation, every shadow holding the promise of danger. The townspeople had fortified their positions, turning every barn, ditch, and silo into a defensive stronghold. Rachel stood at the center of it all, her eyes scanning the horizon, her rifle a natural extension of her body. When the wolves made their move, it came like a thunderstorm. The roar of engines filled the night as they descended on the farm in a calculated, multi-pronged assault. Fire erupted at the eastern fence, an attempt to draw defenders out of position. Explosions lit up the night sky, but the people of Pine Valley held their ground. Rachel moved like a ghost through the chaos. From the hayloft to the barn roof, her rifle found its mark again and again. Each shot was deliberate, crippling rather than killing, a message to the wolves that they were outmatched. Emma and Ethan followed her instructions to the letter, relaying messages to their neighbors, and holding the fallback positions with steely determination. Tom and Martha coordinated the defense, their voices steady over the crackling radios. The wolves had numbers, but they lacked Rachel's precision and her ability to think 3 steps ahead. They stumbled into pits she had dug weeks earlier, were funneled into ambush zones lined with tripwires and improvised barricades. Every corner of the farm had been turned into a weapon, and every inch was defended with the kind of determination that only came from protecting something irreplaceable. As dawn approached, the wolves' assault began to falter. Smoke hung heavy in the air, and the sounds of engines were replaced by panicked shouts. Viper, the leader of the Iron Wolves, found himself alone in the field, his bike disabled by a spike strip. Rachel approached him slowly, her rifle trained on his chest. The sun rose behind her, casting her in a golden light that made her seem larger than life. "It's over," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You've lost." Viper's defiance flickered, but then he dropped the knife he'd been clutching. His eyes darted around, seeing his men disarmed and scattered, their morale shattered. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "There's more like us out there." Rachel didn't flinch. "Then I'll be ready, and so will they." She gestured toward the townspeople emerging from their positions, dirt-streaked but victorious. "You came for my land, my family, my town, and now you'll face the consequences." By the time the sun fully rose, the wolves were rounded up and restrained, the injured were tended to, the fires extinguished. Rachel stood tall in the morning light, her children by her side. The farm, scarred but standing, bore witness to their victory. They'd come for her land, they'd come for her family, they'd come to break Pine Valley. But they'd forgotten one crucial truth. You never corner a predator without expecting a fight, and when you do, you'd better pray she doesn't bite back.